because they want to know these answers, and they're using these answers to help dictate who they're going to invite for interviews and accept ultimately. Ask Dr. Gray Premed Q&A brought to you by Blueprint MCAT. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Dr. Gray?
I am wonderful. What can I help you with?
So I was wondering, I had written my personal statement right after I had read your book and talked about my seed and how I had watered that seed. And when I had given it to all the people who I kind of trust and love, so my husband being one of them, and then the surgeon that I work for as well, and then a mentor who's in residency down in Texas for emergency medicine, they all kind of said the same thing. They're like, you need to add your military experience in it.
Yep.
And for me, the military wasn't even like close to my seed. So I had been in the military when I kind of had that interest into medicine. So I was pregnant with my daughter, had a great experience with my OBGYN and my ultrasound technician, and kind of that's how it sparked.
Yep.
But they're like, you have to add your military experience. Like that's what's going to catch people's eye. And it was my husband that had started it. So I was like, oh no, like you don't know what this is about. You're not in the healthcare field.
Yep.
And then the surgeon I work with, he said the same thing. And he's an MD and a dentist. So I was like, oh, maybe they're on to something.
Yep.
And then my friend had said the same thing. I was like, okay, like obviously I'm doing something wrong. And so I figured I'd just kind of throw that out there. Like, do I listen to them and maybe add it? Or obviously it's kind of done now because I've already written my personal statement and submitted it and onto secondaries. But I figured it was an important question to ask for other people.
For other people, yeah. So, look, I wrote a book on how to write a personal statement. I stand by almost everything I've written in that book, right? I'm allowed to change my mind here and there. But to me, the goal of the personal statement is, why do you want to be a doctor? Not why do you want to be a doctor, and have you also done something very cool that you think needs to stand out so that you can catch our attention?
I think a big thing too, they made a really great point. And so I had added like a little tiny one sentence about, hey, because I had talked about my pregnancy, that was my seed for my intro. And I was like, talking about how like I liked the fact that she was helping me, and I'm used to serving people in the military, but this was different, right? I'm going to be serving this little human, tiny human. And so they made a great point about how if I mentioned it in my personal statement, that I would get more people who are interested in me for the right reasons that are paying attention to my personal statement. So I was like, I get it, but I don't think that adding.
Well, let me challenge. What does that even mean? If you mention it in your personal statement, you'll get people who are interested in you for the right reason. What does that mean? Because
I think that like mentioning stuff that I'm passionate about will attract the people that are also interested in the same things that I'm interested in.
Well, that's the complete basis of everything I talk about, right? Yeah. Telling your story, showing what your passions are, so that you can connect with another human being. That's 1,000% all that I talk about.
Yeah.
And the personal statement is, why do you want to be a doctor?
Yeah.
Not why do you want to be a doctor, and tell me all of the interesting things about you so that we can find some common ground, and hopefully that's where we're connected. That's what the activity section's for.
Yeah. And I said, so that's exactly what I said. So my thing was, I told them, I was like, listen, I'm 100%, like I'm a veteran, right? I served the military, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think it needs to be in my personal statement because I have it written and blasted everywhere else, my activities, my secondary, and everything else that they're going to read.
And you're going to check the box that says you were in the military.
Yeah. And so another argument was, well, the personal statement's the first thing they read. And I was like,
no, who says that? How do you know?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. That was the argument. I was like, I don't know. I'm not an admissions committee, so I don't know if that's the first thing they read.
Yeah. So this is where I just push back against all of that noise, because what they're, and I 1,000% understand why they're recommending it, and I completely disagree with it. You can't play this game of, okay, what are they going to look at first? This is where I'm going to put all of the interesting things about me, because that's what they're going to look at first. And then you get to the activity section, you're like, well, what do I talk about now? I don't have any.
Yeah,
Like
I
you just
gave everything.
and I had this conversation earlier with another Ask Dr. Gray recording. The student was like, where do I put that I have a multicultural background because I'm an immigrant? And where do I put that I'm interested in primary care? And for you, where do I put that I'm a vet? And where do I put that I'm a mom? And where do I put, like, the answer is you don't. Yeah. You do the best you can with each part of the application with the specific question in front of you at that moment. Yeah. So for the personal statement, you sit down, you write the personal statement. The goal isn't, let me throw everything at them. The goal is, why do you want to be a doctor? Okay, great. So we told that story.
That's the way I was answering it. Yeah, that's perfect. The way I was answering it was, because I'm in my mind, I'm like, they're asking me a question, so therefore I should answer the question that they asked. But
exactly.
My surgeon's argument was that they don't care why you want to be a doctor. They want you to prove through actions or like the difficulties that you can make it in med school.
No, and that is one way of thinking about the personal statement. I completely disagree with that way of thinking about the personal statement.
Yeah,
because
that's why I'm confused.
The prompt,
I'm no med student.
I'm
no
prompt,
doctor. I was like, how am I supposed to argue against those?
The prompt is, why do you want to be a doctor?
Yeah,
that's the prompt, right? There are people out there. There are admissions people. There are advisors out there who suggest doing what your surgeon friend suggests. I completely disagree with it because that's not what the prompt says, right? Yeah. And so that, number one. Number two is, there are a million reasons why to be a doctor, but there are only a few core really good reasons that are going to give me personally the really good, warm, fuzzy feelings that you're doing this for the right reasons. Yeah. Not just because you're smart enough, not just because you think you're hardworking enough, not just because you like science enough, not just because you really love puzzles and you think this is all just one big giant freaking puzzle, right? Not just because you think you can be, which is the angle that he's taking. You should show them that you can do this, that you're prepared to do this, you have the skills to do this. And to me, like, when 60,000 students applying to medical school all say that they're prepared to do it, they can do it, who am I supposed to believe? And so I constantly come back to, well, number one, what's the prompt, right? And that the prompt is not asking for those things. And number two, how do we as humans connect? We connect through understanding each other, not from being told, I'm good enough. I want to understand why you're sitting in front of me, or why at least you're trying to sit in front of me to have an interview. I want to understand why you want to be a doctor, right? So I think for you and for everyone else out there, there will always be someone who disagrees with me, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just at an advisor conference, a big national advisor conference, and all these advisors are coming up to me. And one of them literally came up to me. He's like, I don't like you. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, and we talked, and he completely just disagrees with what I say.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I have receipts to back up all these students getting into medical school. I was literally just talking to a student who went through Application Academy with me, and she's going to UCSD, really good medical school.
Yeah.
And on their, like, I don't know if it was a second look day or orientation day, because they're starting soon. There was like these group of students, and somehow she's like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. We all started talking about it, but they all followed. She's like, they all followed your advice, Dr. Gray, and we're all sitting there at UCSD. I'm like, so what you're saying is UCSD approves of my message, right?
Yeah.
But look, we're all humans at the end of the day. We all have our own opinions, our own biases. I stand behind the fact that we as humans connect through stories. That for the personal statement, the prompt is, why do you want to be a doctor? For the most part, right? That's paraphrasing a little bit. But the story about why you want to be a doctor is what's going to connect human to human. Not beating your chest saying, I'm good enough to do this, so you should let me do it.
Yeah.
I just don't agree with it.
I totally agree. And so you make me feel a lot better, because my resident friend had convinced me in my head. He was like, you need to change your personal statement. I was like, I'm a week out from like submitting this. I can't, but I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then literally the day before I submitted, I was like, I'm not changing it. Like, this personal statement is me.
Good.
Like, this is exactly the way that I wanted it to be put. And so I just didn't end up changing it. But I was like, 3 people were telling me to change it.
And that's the answer, right? At the end of the day, if you told me, these 3 people told me something different, and I went back and looked at my personal statement and I changed it, and I really like how it turned out based on what they told me to do, then I would say, perfect. Then you did the right thing because you told the story the way that you wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? I can only offer suggestions. I can offer you rationale behind those suggestions, but ultimately it's your story.
I know. And every time I look back at it, because I read it at least twice a week, I'm like, yeah, this is it.
Good.
Because you have to, like, now that we're doing secondaries, you have to look back and see like your why. Because if you don't, you're going to get drowned in secondary questions that are stressful.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big thing too, because my husband was like, why are you doing like this? Because you've already submitted your application. I was like, but this is pertinent to secondaries too, because what happens if someone disagrees with my secondary responses? Then I got to remember that I just have to make sure that it works for me and nobody else.
Yeah. And secondaries are very different for me. Secondaries, again, answer the darn question. So, which is the same for the personal statement, but I don't. So, this confuses students. I don't recommend stories for secondaries because if I'm reading a secondary and it's like, tell me whatever the question is, right? And I immediately get a story, I'm like, why aren't you answering the question? Like, I want to know the question. And
but I feel like you can answer it with questions. So like
sometimes
there was one for, like, I just did one for Utah yesterday, and it was like, why USOM or whatever. But then it asked me, like, it didn't specifically ask me why I chose that school. It asked me like how I could contribute to the culture. So I was like, well, which question do I answer? Do I answer why I want to go to the school? Because it was just the title. The title was why USOM. And then the prompt was, why do you want, or how are you going to contribute to the culture or something? I was like, which one do I answer? And it's only 150 words. So like, you don't have that much space. So do you answer both? Yeah,
it depends. It depends on specifically what the prompt is, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. So
I can tell you the prompt.
Yeah, tell me.
Okay, I got it written right here. In 2019, the Utah School of Medicine began a strategic transformation process to emphasize community, relationships, and professionalism in the learning culture. How does our program align with your career goals, and how will you contribute to this learning culture? So it wasn't so much like how.
Yeah. So for me, answer the darn question. They asked you 2 very specific questions. And unfortunately, what students do is what you're confusing yourself with is this a why us question? Is this a why? 2 very specific questions they asked. Yeah. Those are the questions that you answer.
Okay.
Don't try to assume, and this is where, again, this is good general information for everyone, maybe less specifically for you, but this is where I disagree with the secondary process that a lot of people recommend of write generic essays that you know are going to be popular. Write the diversity essay, write the adversity essay, write whatever those very general essays are. And my response is always the essay prompts in these secondaries are so nuanced that by the time you get done writing the generic essay, you're going to have to you should completely rewrite it because the school is asking super, super specific stuff. Yeah.
But I mean, like, so for instance, because you always say to like reference back to their mission statements, I feel like all mission statements are pretty.
But why are we talking about mission statements? Read that prompt again.
Yeah. Okay. So it says, how am I going to contribute to the culture and how my career goals align with the school?
Yeah. AKA nothing about mission statement.
Yeah. But it still talks about like the school specifically. So that's why I went back to the mission.
But like, who talks about the school specifically?
The question, how am I going to contribute to the learning culture?
To the culture, the learning culture. So the first question is, what is the learning culture? What are they specifically referencing there?
Teamwork. I get teamwork, communication.
Where is that? Read me the mission statement.
Okay, mission statement is the University of Utah School of Medicine Office of Admissions serves, I think I just pulled this from the secondary website. So I don't know if it's the actual one. Serves the state of Utah, our medical school, and the healthcare profession by admitting well-qualified and prepared medical students through a holistic culture based on valuing teamwork, professionalism, compassion, and communication. We strive to select a diverse and an innovative class who exemplifies dedication, service to their community, and patience, leadership, research skill, and academic excellence.
Okay, so that's the mission statement. Now go back to the prompt. What does the prompt say again?
The prompt was, in 2019, the Utah School of Medicine began a strategic transformation process to emphasize community, relationships, and professionalism in the learning culture. How does our program align with your career goals, and how will you contribute to this learning culture?
Yeah.
So it's the mission statement.
No, but it's not the mission statement.
You just mentioned the community, professionalism, and relationships the same as the mission statement.
Yeah.
Okay, we can agree to disagree.
I don't want to agree to disagree. I want to be right here because it's very important. It's very important. Answer the darn question. Okay. They gave you, in their lead up to the prompt, what they want you to focus on.
Yep.
It's not the mission statement. They may have similar words.
Yeah.
But they say, hey, here's what we're focused on. In 2019, we switched our focus. This is what we're focused on. How are you going to, based on this one sentence before this other prompt, this other question, how are you going to fit into this?
Okay. So can I read you my answer so you can see, or do you want?
If you want.
So now I'm scared because I don't know if I answered the question properly. I put, my background as an Air Force veteran has influenced both who I am and how I interact with others. In the military, one team, one fight was ingrained in our culture. I do not look at people and see differences, but an opportunity to learn a new perspective or to simply connect with another human being. This mindset began in basic military training, which is the initial 8-week course required to qualify as an Air Force airman. Every person in BMT was immersed in the stressful environment of 4 a.m. wake-up calls, perpetual physical training, and combat simulated conditions. The shared mental, physical, and emotional challenges of training acted as a common ground through which we could support each other. I plan to utilize this team-centered mentality at UUSOM to encourage connection between students, which in turn will help reduce stress and promote collaboration among peers.
Okay.
Did I answer the question?
I really like what you wrote.
Okay.
Go back to the prompt. What is the question again? I'm not saying you did or didn't. I was
like, I answered I feel like I answered the second question, but I didn't answer the first question.
Okay. So what is the first question?
How does our program align with your career goals?
Okay. So you mentioned nothing about career goals there.
No.
Okay. That's why I am so specific. Answer the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. I really love your answer. And someone reading it will go, oh, this is really fantastic. I don't really care that she didn't answer the question, which is fine, right? It's fine. And for secondaries, you have to answer the questions.
Well, I'm glad I've only done 2 and I still have 4 left.
Yeah. So for me, right, and there are these trade secrets out there that aren't really secrets, but there are ways to weed out people very easily. Did you answer the question? Nope. I'm not even going to look at you. Right?
Yeah.
Just super simple things. Like when I put out a job posting for like random freelancers, in the middle of a random paragraph, I'll put, please send me who won the World Series in 2005 to see if they actually read the prompt. Because unfortunately, with a lot of these job sites, people just blast you with their resumes. Oh, I saw your post. Here's my resume. I saw your post. And so if they don't mention anything, I just delete because I know they didn't read it. Yeah. There's a residency. I heard this story recently. I forget where I heard it from. A residency program director, because residencies are getting bombarded with applications, unfortunately. Like students just apply to every program out there. And so a residency program director, basically on his website, at the very bottom that says, if you're interested in our program, click this link and fill out this form. And he didn't care, she didn't care, I think it was a he. They didn't care that 1,000 students applied to their program. They only looked at the 50 or 60 or whatever the numbers were. People that actually went to the website, clicked the link, and did what they wanted to do, assuming that people who were truly interested in their program went to the website, read about the program, looked at everything, and then saw this link and said, "Oh, let me go here." Right? So they're asking you very specific questions, hopefully for very specific reasons, right? Because they want to know these answers, and they're using these answers to help dictate who they're going to invite for interviews and accept ultimately.
Yeah, I really like that because they're blind to MCAT and GPA. As long as you meet the minimum requirements,
that's awesome.
I think they look at the secondaries first, and then they base it holistically on the rest, like stats and everything. So that's really, I like that. I think that was really cool.
That's awesome.
I think they're interested in the secondary prompts. So
yeah, and I'll tell you, when I wrote my personal statement book, I went to a friend who I finally met in person at this advisor meetup recently, or advisor conference recently, Dr. Rivera at NYU. He's the associate dean of admissions at NYU.
That's the one I always see him everywhere.
Yeah. So
he's always on podcasts.
I talked to him when I wrote my book, and I said, "Hey, Raphael, I'm writing this book. Will you give me a quote to put in the book about the importance of personal statements?" He's like, "Actually, we don't like personal statements. We look at secondaries." He's like, personal statements are so, like, he called them village statements. He's like, students get too much input from everyone else that they're not personal anymore. And they're trying to do all of these things. I'm like, well, hopefully after students read my book, you'll get better personal statements. But yeah, they use secondaries. They like secondaries a lot more.
And it's very customized to the school too, because I feel like you said, the personal statement is so generic that you're not going to get much out of it. If they're interested in the school, they're going to put a lot of work into the secondaries.
Yeah. Well, good questions. Keep rocking with those secondaries. Thank you for your service. And
my pleasure. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Don't stress about not changing the personal statement, because you told the story. It sounds like the best way that you wanted to, and you're happy with it. And for secondaries, answer the darn question.
I will. Thank you so much for your help.